Nobody spends their last $10 on a guitar string. That is not a rational decision. That is the decision of someone for whom music is not a hobby or a pastime or a career ambition, but something more fundamental than any of those things, something closer to the category of breathing, something the body insists on regardless of what the circumstances suggest would be more sensible. On a cold Wednesday morning in November 1991, in the Marché aux Puces de Saint-Ouen at the northern edge of Paris, a 23-year-old man named Elias Moreau made exactly this decision. He spent his last 10 francs on a single guitar string. And what happened in the 4 hours that followed changed everything about what came next. Not because of luck. Not because of coincidence. But because of what happens when someone does the most honest thing available to them in the worst possible circumstances, and the right person is close enough to see it. Paris. November 1991. The Marché aux Puces de Saint-Ouen on a cold Wednesday morning had that particular quality of the flea market in the off-season. Not the crowded weekend market full of tourists and browsers and people for whom the Puces was an experience to be had, but the Wednesday version. The working version, the market as it was before it became famous, and as it still was on weekday mornings when the serious dealers opened their stalls, and the serious buyers came and everyone else stayed home. The covered alleys of the Marché Benesum were lit by hanging bare bulbs that cast warm amber pools on the merchandise, old furniture, vintage clothing, stacked paintings, boxes of records tools, clocks, mirrors, the beautiful accumulated debris of other people's lives priced and arranged with the particular care of people who understand that one person's discarded past is another person's necessary future. The November cold came through the gaps in the corrugated iron roofing and mixed with the warmth of the hanging bulbs and the small electric heaters. Some dealers kept under their counters, creating a climate that was neither warm nor cold, but that specific indoor-outdoor temperature of covered markets in winter that is its own particular thing. The cobblestones of the alleys were slightly damp from overnight rain. The smell was the particular smell of the Puces, old wood and metal and fabric, and the faint suggestion of stories that had accumulated in objects over decades. Elias Moreau was in the Marché Benesum because it was warm enough. He was 23 years old. He'd been in Paris for 11 weeks, having arrived from Lyon with a backpack, a battered acoustic guitar in a canvas gig bag, and enough money to last approximately 2 months if he was careful. He had not been careful enough. He had found a room in a hostel in the 18th arrondissement that was cheaper than most, but still more than he had budgeted. He had found sporadic work, carrying boxes for a furniture removal company, washing dishes at a restaurant on the Rue des Abbesses for 3 weeks until the restaurant's owner decided he had more staff than he needed. The guitar he had brought from Lyon had a cracked bridge that he had repaired twice himself with wood glue and which had held until last week when it had opened again, this time taking the 4th string with it when the tension failed. He had 10 francs left. Not 10 francs until payday. 10 francs in the world. He had spent the morning in the Puces because it was covered and the hanging bulbs gave warmth, and because one of the dealers in the Marché Benesum sold guitar parts and strings individually, rather than in sets, and a single 4th string for his guitar cost 9 francs 50. He stood at the dealer's counter, a narrow stall with a pegboard behind it, hung with string packets and capots and picks and small electronic tuners, and put his 10-franc coin on the counter. The dealer was a small man of 60 in a brown corduroy jacket and a red wool scarf, who had been selling instrument accessories at the Puces since 1974, and who had seen the particular expression on Elias's face before on other faces in other cold Wednesdays, and who took the coin and gave him the string and 50 centimes change, without commentary or expression, which was its own form of dignity. Elias Moreau put the 50 centimes in his jacket pocket, took the string, and sat on a wooden crate at the end of the dealer's alley to restring the guitar. He was thin, noticeably thin in the way of someone who has been managing food carefully for several weeks, the particular thinness that shows first in the face and the wrists, medium height, dark hair that had grown past the point where it was meant to stop and was now simply long without being styled, falling across his forehead and ears, His skin warm olive-toned, dark circles under brown eyes that were nonetheless alert and present. He wore a dark forest green parka with a broken zip that he held closed with a safety pin at the chest. A thick burgundy and cream-striped wool sweater underneath dark brown corduroy trousers fraying at the left knee. Black leather boots with a worn-down heel on the right side. A dark blue wool hat pulled over his ears. He restrung the guitar with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this many times. The old broken string removed, the new string threaded through the bridge pin and up to the tuning peg, wound carefully and consistently, tuned by ear because he had no tuner and did not need one. His hands, despite the cold, moved with the particular competence of someone who learned to play on instruments that needed constant repair and who has become expert at the maintenance precisely because he could not afford to pay anyone else to do it. When the string was in place and tuned, he played a chord, then adjusted the fourth string slightly, played another chord, then another. Then, without deciding to, he began to play a song. The song was Johnny Halliday's Queed Your Time. He played it because it was the song his father had played on a record player in their apartment in Lyon every Sunday morning for as long as Elias could remember. The particular association of a song with a specific quality of light and smell and time of week, that meant the song had become for him something more than music, something that carried an entire world of Sunday mornings inside its chord progression. He played it the way he played everything, without sheet music by ear, with a natural physical ease that was completely at odds with the cold and the wooden crate and the 10 francs spent and the 50 centimes remaining, and the broken zip held with a safety pin. The Marché Vernissant continued its Wednesday morning around him. The dealer in the brown corduroy jacket and red wool scarf polished something behind his counter. Two dealers 3 stalls down had a conversation about a piece of furniture. A browser in a heavy grey overcoat examined a stack of old vinyl records without looking up. Then something changed in the alley. Not dramatically. Gradually, the way things change in a covered market when music enters the space. A slight slowing in the movement of the few people present, a quality of attention appearing in bodies that had been inattentive a moment before. A man had been in the Marché Vernissant since 9 in the morning. He came to the Pruses occasionally on weekday mornings, not the weekend version, the Wednesday version, the working version. He came for the records primarily. There was a dealer in the Marché Bion who kept a crate of vinyl from the 1960s and early 1970s that he worked through methodically. And there was a dealer in the Marché Vernissant who sometimes had guitar parts that were interesting. He came in the morning when it was uncrowded, and he could look at things without being looked at. He wore a long, dark navy wool overcoat open at the front over a deep rust orange chunky knit sweater with a wide collar, dark olive green corduroy trousers, dark brown leather Chelsea boots with an elastic side panel, a burgundy wool flat cap pulled forward on his head, a dark grey wool scarf wrapped twice around his neck. His greying brown hair visible at the temples and the nape of his neck below the cap, medium height, slightly broad-shouldered, 48 years old. A canvas record bag and dark waxed cotton with leather handles hanging from his right shoulder, already containing 2 records from earlier in the morning. He was Johnny Halliday. He had been 3 stalls away from the guitar parts dealer when Elias sat on the wooden crate and began restringing his guitar. He had not paid particular attention. Restringing was not unusual in a market that sold instrument parts. He had continued examining a wooden box of miscellaneous hardware at the stall he was at. Then the playing started. He heard the chord first, then the adjustment, then the second chord, then the song beginning. He straightened up from the wooden box of hardware. He listened for 30 seconds without moving. The alley was not long. The music carried clearly in the covered space. What he heard was Quasar Time played with a natural fluency and a particular physical commitment that had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with someone for whom playing was simply what the body did when it was allowed to. He put down the piece of hardware he had been holding and walked toward the music. He came around the corner of the stall and saw the wooden crate and the young man on it. 23 years old, dark hair fallen across his face. forest green parka with the broken zip held by a safety pin, burgundy and cream-striped sweater, dark brown corduroy trousers fraying at the knee, black boots with the worn-down right heel, dark blue wool hat pulled to his ears, eyes closed, playing Ouija time on a battered acoustic guitar with a fresh fourth string that was slightly brighter in tone than the other strings because it was new. Johnny Halliday stood at the entrance to the small space where the wooden crate was and listened. He did not announce himself. He did not say anything. He stood with his canvas record bag on his shoulder and his dark navy wool overcoat and his rust-orange chunky knit sweater and his burgundy wool flat cap, and listened to a 23-year-old play his song on a repaired guitar on a wooden crate in the Marché Vernison on a cold November Wednesday. Elias played the whole song, 2 verses and 2 choruses, and the instrumental bridge and the final chorus. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. With his eyes closed, when he finished, his hands lifted from the strings. He opened his eyes and found a man in a dark navy overcoat and a rust-orange sweater and a burgundy flat cap standing 3 meters away looking at him. His face did the thing all faces do. The recognition arriving in stages, the disbelief following immediately behind, the verification process, the disbelief failing to hold against the evidence. He said nothing for 4 seconds. Then he said, "You're..." He stopped. "You're him." Johnny Halliday nodded. Simply, "Yes." Here is the first twist of this story. Johnny Halliday did not ask Elias about his situation. He did not produce a business card or offer a phone number or make any gesture toward the future at all. He did the immediate thing. He sat down on the wooden crate next to Elias, not beside. On the same crate, side by side, the crate wide enough for 2 people if they sat close, his dark navy overcoat, his rust-orange sweater, his canvas record bag on his lap. "Can I?" he said, and held out his hand toward the guitar. Elias handed it to him. The guitar, battered body, worn freets, fresh bright 4th string, went from the thin olive-toned hands of a 23-year-old to the slightly broader hands of a 48-year-old who had been playing guitar for 35 years. Johnny Halliday looked at the guitar, ran his thumb across the strings, hearing the slight tonal difference of the new 4th string among the older ones. Then he played an A minor chord, listened to it, adjusted the 3rd string slightly with his thumb on the tuning peg, played the chord again. "Better," he said, not to Elias, to the guitar. Then he played Ouija Time, his own song, on Elias's battered guitar with the fresh 4th string in the Marché Vernison of the Pousses de Cent-Ans on a cold Wednesday morning in November 1991. He played it differently from how Elias had played it. Not better, differently. The same song finding a different shape in different hands that had lived with it for 30 years rather than the hands of someone who had grown up hearing it on Sunday mornings in Lyon. When he finished, he held the guitar out to Elias. Elias took it back. Both of them sat on the wooden crate in the amber light of the hanging bulbs. The dealer in the brown corduroy jacket and the red wool scarf was standing behind his counter watching. He had recognized Johnny Halliday at the moment he sat down on the crate, and had decided not to say anything because something was happening that saying something would damage. 2 other dealers had drifted to the entrance of the alley without quite deciding to. A browser in a heavy grey overcoat was still holding a vinyl record from the stack he had been examining, but was no longer looking at it. Nobody said anything. Johnny Halliday looked at Elias. "How long have you been in Paris?" he said. 11 weeks, said Elias. "How long have you been playing?" said Johnny Halliday. Elias thought about it. "Since I was 8, he said. 15 years. Johnny Halliday looked at the guitar in Elias's hands. "That string is new," he said. Elias looked at the 4th string, its slightly brighter shine against the worn silver of the older strings. "Yes," he said. "What did it cost?" said Johnny Halliday. 9 francs 50, said Elias. He did not say that 9 francs 50 was everything he had had. He did not need to. Johnny Halliday looked at the broken zip held by the safety pin, at the right boot with the worn-down heel, at the dark circles under the alert brown eyes, at the thin wrists and the thin face, He had enough information. Here is the second twist. Johnny Halliday stood up from the wooden crate. He reached into the inside pocket of his dark navy wool overcoat. He produced a small folded piece of paper and a pen. He wrote something, folded the paper, held it out to Elias. Elias took it, looked at it without opening it. "Open it later," said Johnny Halliday. "Not now." He picked up his canvas record bag, adjusted the burgundy flat cap on his head, and then he did something that Elias had not expected. He turned to the dealer in the brown corduroy jacket and red wool scarf behind the guitar parts counter. "A full set of strings," he said, "the best you have, and a hard case if you have one that fits this guitar." The dealer produced the strings and a black hard case from beneath his counter without comment. Johnny Halliday paid, handed the case and the strings to Elias, shook his hand. A proper firm handshake, both hands. The particular warmth of a handshake that is trying to say something. A handshake can say better than words. Then he walked back down the alley of the Marché Vernissage in his dark navy wool overcoat and rust-orange sweater and burgundy flat cap and dark olive corduroy trousers and dark brown Chelsea boots, the canvas record bag on his shoulder, and disappeared around the corner toward the Marché Byron. Elias Moreau sat on the wooden crate with a black hard case on his lap and a packet of strings in his hand and a folded piece of paper in his jacket pocket. He sat there for approximately 2 minutes without moving. Then he opened the folded piece of paper. On it was an address in the 14th arrondissement and a time, the following Monday morning at 10 o'clock. Beneath the address, 2 lines of handwriting. "There is a rehearsal space at this address. A friend of mine runs it. Tell him you are coming from me. 3 months of free rehearsal time. What you do with it is entirely yours. No name signed, no phone number. No further instruction." Here is the final twist of this story. Elias Moreau went to the address in the 14th arrondissement the following Monday morning at 10 o'clock. He told the man who answered the door, a compact, energetic man in his 50s named Gilles in a yellow and grey plaid shirt and dark jeans, that he was coming from a mutual acquaintance. Gilles asked no questions. Showed him the rehearsal space, a soundproofed room in the basement of the building with an upright piano, a full drum kit, a PA system, and enough space for a 4-piece band. Gave him a key. Told him his hours were 6 to 9, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, and he could use the space for 3 months. Elias used the space for 3 months. He recorded 8 original songs during those 3 months. Not J-10s, not K-J-Thames, not any of the Sunday morning songs from the Lyon apartment. His own songs, songs that had been assembling themselves inside him for the 11 weeks in Paris and the years before Paris and the Sunday mornings, and the broken bridge and the 10 francs and the fresh 4th string. He sent a cassette demo to 3 small independent labels in Paris. 2 did not respond. 1 responded in February 1992. He signed a contract in March. His first single was released in June. It reached number 42 in the French charts. Not spectacular, real. The black hard case from the Marché Vernissage went with him to every session, every rehearsal, every performance for the next 7 years until it was replaced by something newer that he used professionally. He kept the black case anyway. It sat in the corner of his studio for years. He never told anyone publicly the specific story of the wooden crate and the cold Wednesday and the 10 francs and the man in the rust-orange sweater. He told it privately at dinner tables, with the particular careful detail of someone who has told a story many times and still cannot quite believe it themselves. The part he always told last was the 50 centimes, the 50 centimes change from the 9 franc 50 string that he had put in his jacket pocket on the wooden crate in the Marché Vernissage. He still had it, a single 50 centime coin in a small glass dish on the shelf above his piano in his studio. Not as a lucky charm. Not as a souvenir. Simply as the physical remnant of the morning when everything he had in the world was a song and 9 francs 50 and 50 centimes change, and the right person happened to be 3 stalls away. And here is what this cold Wednesday morning in November 1991, in the Marché Vernissage, leaves all of us. A 23-year-old man spent his last 10 francs on a guitar string because the alternative, not playing, was not available to him as an option. He sat on a wooden crate in a covered market and played a song because that was the most honest thing he could do in that moment. And he did not have the resources to do anything less honest. Johnny Halliday heard it from 3 stalls away and walked toward it, because when something real is happening 3 stalls away, you walk toward it. He sat on the same wooden crate. He played the guitar. He wrote an address on a piece of paper. He bought a hard case and a set of strings. None of these things are large gestures. They are all precise ones. There is a difference between large and precise. That is the difference between generosity as performance and generosity as attention. Johnny Halliday that morning was not performing anything. He was paying attention to a fresh 4th string that was slightly brighter than the others, to a broken zip held with a safety pin, to dark circles under alert brown eyes. He saw exactly what was there and responded to exactly what was there. Nothing more, nothing less. And have you ever spent the last of what you had on the thing that mattered most rather than the thing that was most sensible? Tell us in the comments. Because these are the stories that remind us that the most honest thing available to us in the worst possible circumstances is almost always the right thing, and that sometimes the right person is close enough to hear it.